because obviously this next matchup, you're going to face the best offense that you've played so far in the playoffs, but also a team that you got into a shootout with last time. How do you feel your defense is doing so far and how they can match up with the Chiefs?
Yeah. So that first Chiefs game, Mahomes, I mean, I was at the game.
Yeah.
Mahomes was on fire in the first half. I think he had 202 passing yards. Von Bell had a really lucky breakup that would have been like another 50 yards, and they would have gotten 3 more points. That first game, Mahomes on fire the first half. Second half, they limited him, I think, to 52, 54 passing yards, something like that in the second half. So they do have some tape on Mahomes to look at, that they were successful with, but with how they've played this far in the postseason, I never thought I'd say this at the end of the year or even in the middle of the year when Joe Burrow started cooking and they were winning shootouts. The defense has won the game the last 2 weeks because the offense has been sputtering in the red zone. They've been terrible in the red zone. Their defense and Evan McPherson has basically won them the first 2 games. And that's something we've never seen as Bengals fans because, in all the playoff games before, it's usually the offense is playing terrible and the defense is holding them along. But the difference is Joe Burrow's good enough now to score 19 points when other teams score 16, where Andy Dalton wasn't good enough to get to the 19 or 21 point mark. So it's nice to see that, even if our offense, which is easily the strongest unit on our team, it's or special teams, but from the offense or defense, it's the strongest unit. It's nice to see the defense is finally showing up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the interesting point to make on something like that is that, in fact, the defense is almost entirely comprised of guys who kind of have grown with Zach Taylor and this regime. And you think about, I think it's 9 of 11 guys on the current starting defense 9 of 11 guys on the current starting defense outside. The only 2 are Hubbard and Bates were not here in the last coaching regime. And even Hubbard and Bates, it was only their first season that they played under the Marvin Lewis regime. So a whole lot of credit is due to Lou Anarumo. And there are moments that you can pick from the season just to support the fact that Lou Anarumo I don't think he's a Wink Martindale or on that tier of defensive coordinator, but, bringing the 0 blitz against Kansas City in that on that third down in the red zone when you're up 3 and flushing Mahomes out of the pocket and getting him to throw an incompletion. There are very few guys in the NFL that have the cojones to make that call in that position and have it work like the Bengals did, and that's forcing an incompletion. So, I think Alec and I were both in agreement last year that if there was somebody to be fired, maybe it should be Lou Anarumo because his defense, despite the injuries last year, was just not good. I think we're both eating a whole lot of crow on that take as far as Lou Anarumo goes because he has been really good with his scheme this year, and he's really coached his guys up. The last thing I'll say is Jesse Bates talked about how last week that first play of the game that the Titans ran that I know you guys talked about, Jesse Bates knew exactly what was coming because Anarumo had nailed in that concept to them all week. And he just sat there in the middle of the field, watched Tannehill stare down Julio and jump right in front for the pick. So hats off to Lou Anarumo and his defensive coaching staff because the players that they have identified as guys that can contribute have contributed greatly to this team's success. And, the talent evaluation that's occurred since Zach Taylor's gotten here has just paid so many great dividends on that side of the ball.
Yeah, real quick. How do y'all feel about the additions of Chidobe Awuzie, former Cowboy, so I know plenty about him, and then Trey Hendrickson? Because before the season, I can't remember exactly what we said, but honestly, I think, Chow, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I felt like both of us thought they were a little bit overpaid. Hendrickson came off a career year last year, but you wonder, can he do it again? And I mean, this year's he's been fantastic. And then Chidobe, I mean, I watched him in Dallas, and I never really felt like he was a true number 1 corner. And although I wouldn't say that he's like the elite of the elite, he's performed far better in Cincinnati this year than he ever did in Dallas. So how do you feel about those two specifically?
Yeah. So for Cheeto, I mean, he is. This is kind of me being kind of modest about it. He's played a lot better than I thought he was going to play. I remember him and him and Dallas, he wasn't bad. But he was probably their second or third best corner. But that was in a pretty weak secondary when he was there. Yeah. So they were starting Jeff Heath. So I don't really know.
It was rough in the safety spots.
But yeah. And then Trey Hendrickson, he had that great year last year, but people were saying, oh, it's just because of Cam Jordan is taking up the double teams and he's getting free sacks basically. Trey Hendrickson, I think you could say he's probably a top 10 pass rusher in the NFL. His win rate is among the highest in the NFL of anybody, edge rusher or interior D lineman. And one guy you didn't mention, Mike Hilton, was PFF's number one graded. PFF's number one graded in zone coverage this year. So he's been huge too for the defense. And it's kind of just one more thing, and then Jack can give his take on it. But it's kind of nice to see the Bengals have taken the draft approach on offense, and they've kind of fixed up the holes with great free agency signings on the defense. I think their approach that's been pretty good.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add there is, I think when you look at the good defenses around the NFL, Pittsburgh, Denver, you name it, any of those great defenses has a guy on each level of the defense that is a difference maker. And when you look at the Bengals, DJ Reader, we saw this last week, is arguably the best nose tackle in the league against the run. He blew up whatever the Titans wanted to do last weekend, and he's another free agent signing that they brought in. In the linebacking core, I don't know if you could call them difference makers yet, but combined together, Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt play really well off each other's strengths. And then in the back end, it's sort of this by committee approach that they're employing. Chidobe Awuzie, whereas I feel like maybe in Dallas he was asked to, especially with Trayvon Diggs as a rookie, maybe Cheeto was always asked to take the number one receiver, and that maybe exposed some of his flaws on top of him not being very healthy with the Cowboys. But now, granted, it's not the elite corners in the league, but the Bengals have 4 guys in their corner room that I think Alec and I both feel really confident in right now. And I know it sounds hilarious to say, but Eli Apple has really grown into, I'm not going to say an elite corner in this league, but he's grown into serviceable. And in the NFL, the difference between bad, which is what the Bengals have had for several years on the back end, and average makes a world of a difference. And that's what the Bengals are proving right now. They're not a great defense by any means, but when you pair what they do on defense well with what they do on offense and what they can make a difference with on special teams, that's a pretty solid unit that you've got there, and it makes them hard to beat.